Right now.
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 Because it's time to right now.
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 Because it's time to right now.
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 Welcome, my friends, to another daily writing motivation stream. I'm Kaufman, and today we're going to get in 2 solid writing sprints. We're going to try to make some progress for our books and try to push. Sundays are always a great day. It's that end of the week, and it's that time where we're maybe we can try to hit our goal for the week and see just what we can accomplish. So whether you're working on your novel, your graphic novel, your screenplay, your flash fiction story, or something else altogether, come join us. We're going to kick it off with a 30-minute sprint, and then make sure to stick around. We'll chat it up during the break and see just how everyone is doing, but I know I'm eager to hop into Scarecrow. I'd love to hear from you. Hop into the chat, and let's get into it. So, as you can see, I have the writing software all set up. I am all ready. I was like, after not having gotten to write the past day or two, I know I'm eager to continue the Scarecrow epic and see just how many words we can get into. So I am all set. Whether you are writing, editing, revising, brainstorming, or something else in between, come join us because it's time to write now. All right, my writers, how did that sprint treat you? Were you able to make some progress? Drop a comment, whether you're writing, editing, revising, or maybe you're just getting in some productivity and getting some other work in. I would love to hear. How did that first sprint treat you? Hopefully we were able to push. I feel like a first sprint for me is always a good wake-up call and a good push and dive into the writing vibe for the day. And yeah, so I'm feeling pretty good about it. I know for that one, it's interesting. I actually like the chapter that I just finished revising is probably one of the shorter chapters in in the Last Scarecrow. It's been a while because a lot of this past part of the book, so many chapters have gone longer and longer and longer, and I felt like it was a good balance to be able to create a shorter, more compact, kind of little fun. There's a couple of fun moments in it, but nothing that feels like extremely crazy. I think it creates a nice balance for the reader because there's been so much intense stuff with this action adventure. So very, very cool. Originally, it was supposed to just be one chapter, but I realized I hit the end of a story beat, and it actually just made sense to end off the chapter. Since they're traveling, and I decided to have them make like a camp and sleep. So I thought that was actually a good moment because they're now about to embark into another dark area. It's interesting. This next part of the world that I'm exploring is actually kind of cool. It's not. I don't explore this part of the world too in depth, but the characters are entering a part of the world called the Nightlands, and essentially it's the lands of the last. So for those of you who aren't familiar with my world, the Last Scarecrow, the lands of the last is essentially has been screwed over by weather. So there's different weather effects nearly in every part of the world because it's so inconsistent. The sun and the moon are imbalanced, so days and nights can last for minutes, hours, or days, depending on which part of the world they're in. The Nightlands is a part of the world that has basically been trapped and stuck in an eternal night. So it's interesting. Nobody really knows why, other than that it's kind of advanced over a slow period of time. But we're about to see why the characters are about to travel through a part of the world that has been taken over by the Nightlands, and to see why what has happened to its former inhabitants. So it's actually a very fun. It's probably one of the darker. It's one of the darker environments the characters get to travel through in the Last Scarecrow. So far, a lot of the environments, the main obstacles have either been weather effects or the tribes they've encountered. This is the first time they're going to travel through an environment where the obstacle is the land itself. So, yay! I'm so excited. But how did that treat you? It looks like you guys made some good progress on your end. Let's see. By the way, Aphrodite, I saw that you're working on book plates. You said a book plate is a beautifully designed sticker or card that bears an author's signature, can be placed inside a book, usually on the title or first page to make it a signed edition. That's actually really cool. That's a really cool thing. I'm personally not too familiar with like the logistics that go into creating things for special editions. Maybe I will do that for my books eventually. But I know when you look online, like whether it's through TikTok, Instagram, or just through how people are advertising like special editions of books, there's a lot of really cool things that can go into special editions. What's really popular, I know, or what's been really popular, is the sprayed edges. For some reason, sprayed edges is like huge thing this year. But I think there's definitely a number of ways to go about creating a special edition. So that's really, really cool. Nice, Unknown. Pushing in, you're like 142 words, my second chapter of my new book. Oh, that's so exciting, Unknown. What's the new book about? I'd love to hear. You're like, Alicia, like, I removed some works and changed the tense shifts, things I missed. But I'm at 6,550 words and I need to be at 5K. LOL. Well, Alicia, I feel your pain there. I ended off the first draft of Scarecrow at 120,000. And I feel like for fantasy novels, the length of a fantasy novel should probably be like 120,000 maybe maxish range. Somebody told me that it was actually longer, that the max length of like epic fantasy novels is kind of extended a bit, but I have to do some research. But now the Last Scarecrow, I'm about 65% of the way through the second draft. And I want to say that it's pushing 160,000 words. So I definitely need to cut down on word count. Aphrodite, that's actually really cool. You said you sent up the book plates to fans who requested them who bought your book from Amazon and weren't able to come to the book signing. That's a really great way to show appreciation to your fans, Aphrodite. I absolutely love that. I think that's absolutely incredible. I think anything we can do to appreciate our readers, especially when we're still like trying to build our readership and really trying to build that connection, is so important. Absolutely. So absolutely love that. And yeah, so let's see what's on my mind today. Let's just do a simple subscribe, because I know we got a lot of fun things going on in the community, whether you're working on Freaky Friday, our writing competition. The deadline I know is Wednesday, so definitely looking forward to seeing the stories. But for those of you who are new to the channel, welcome to the Right Now community. This is a daily motivation community that I really tried to create and put together to help you, the writers of the world, with finishing your books. We do all types of things, from workshops, fiction contests, conferences, critique groups, you name it, all the way to daily writing sprints. I've now done almost 650 consecutive writing streams and many more to come. So make sure to tap that follow or subscribe button. And we're almost at 1,000. We're almost there. And you'll be alerted when we go live. All right. So I wanted to do that quick subscribe. And I think, let's see, let me pull back up. Let's see, what are we on time? We're exactly at 1:15. So let's push. So our next writing sprint, let's do a 45-minute writing sprint. We're really going to push for our second one and to really see just how much progress we can make. Oh, no, that's, there we go. Perfect. So here's the screen. Awesome. So I feel great about this. Whether you were able to make some progress on the first sprint or not, let's do it. Let's really push ourselves. I know I'm in the start of a new chapter, so I'm going to see what I can accomplish, but I believe in us. So whether you are writing, editing, revising, author branding, or you're just getting some work done, come join us, because it's time to write now. All right, my friends, that is a second writing sprint. Were you able to make some progress that time? Hopefully you got in a couple words, a couple ideas, a couple strategies, or something else altogether. I know I definitely made a little bit of progress in my end. I'm glad I got a nice little start to the beginning of that chapter. I made a, between the two sprints, I actually made a nice little start into it. I'm hoping I didn't pull from the tension too much, because I started with a brief dream. But we'll see. We'll see if that plays out. I haven't done too much with dreams in this story. Let's see. Okay, yeah, so I did about 500 words into this new chapter. So I think I'm feeling good about it. We'll see. We'll see. It's like, yeah. So it's going to take me about 4 or 5 pages to get into the main story beat. So hopefully you're able to make some progress as well. I can tell we've all been pushing forward on our stories and making different types of progress, but definitely really cool. Hey, by the way, welcome, Claudia. I saw you said you hopped in near the end there. Let's see. And I can tell you guys are all working on some different stuff. TLB, by the way, that sounds really cool. What type of story you're working on? Very cool. Unknown. Yeah, you can't decide whether or not to make the story take place in 2 timelines. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard. Once you start doing like different timelines, then you have to start doing a little bit more planning. I think you just always ask yourself what's best for your protagonist. That's always a great question to ask. What's going to be best to tell the story of your main character? Nice, White Seer. Glad you were able to get it back into fantasy. I know, Aphrodite. It's like, especially with her sprints, I feel like sometimes they pass by so quickly, especially when we've like just pushed into the sprint already. So I always want more time to write. Nice, White. So you got 200 words. Excellent. Nice. Alicia, it sounds like you got some progress as well. I removed another 200 words and food was delivered, so got some food. Need the brain power. Well, Claudio, even though you showed up at the last moment, we stream every single day. So I'd say just make sure you subscribe and you'll be alerted when we go live. I do writing sprints I do writing streams every day, but mostly it changes depending on what events we're working on. So I'll be back tomorrow with another daily writing stream. I'll probably go the mid-afternoon, actually, because tomorrow's a Monday. And yeah, and once again, for everyone who's competing in our Freaky Friday competition, Wednesday is the submission deadline. So for those of you who are wanting to compete, whether you're creating a supernatural, a thriller horror, or a dark fantasy story, you still got a couple more days to finish, work on, and revise your flash fiction. All the details are linked down in the YouTube description down below. Next weekend is also the story and critique stream is back. Episode, I'm going to say 52, I believe. I think we're in the 50s now. So if you're wanting feedback on your story, you can submit now. The sooner you submit, the more likely you are to be able to get feedback, a live reading, and a live critique on next weekend's episode of the story and critique stream. But today was a great stream. Thank you so much, my friends. I'm so glad we were able to make some progress. If you want to go check out more writing stuff, we got it all here on the Right Now channel. Well over 600 plus videos between the streams and all the specialty events. And most importantly, if today's stream helped you at all, tap that like button. Help us show the writing algorithms that writing is cool. All right, my friends, I appreciate you. For anyone who's in the YouTube channel members critique group, we'll be starting that in just a moment. I'm going to hop over and we'll see what we see. Let's do it. All right, my friends, thank you all for joining. Thank you so much. I got scared and submitted, not realizing I had a few more days. Aphrodite, if you want to revise and resubmit in a few days, like if there's things you want to adjust, you're more than welcome to. Yeah, I pushed the submission deadline out by a few days to help the community. So, awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone. But unfortunately, that brings us to the end of the stream. Don't forget, words are wind, but stories are forever. I'm Kaufman, and I'll catch you on the morrow. Stay creative, writers.
Words are wind, but stories are forever. I'm Kaufman, and I'll catch you on the morrow. Stay creative, writers. It's time to write.
Right now.
Sorry.
Right now, not right now, but right now. Read now, right now. Is that right?
Words are wind, but stories are forever.